Hello everyone, my name is Nick Infernus and welcome back to another discussion video. In my Legacy Wave 10 video, I got a comment asking for my thoughts on the upcoming Commander Class Optimus Prime from Studio Series 86. And I don't normally do just my thoughts on one figure in a video since I don't think that would make for a very substantial viewing experience, but I figured that what I could do instead is just do a pseudo retrospective on Studio Series as a whole for 2024. Now, I say pseudo retrospective because one wave is still trickling out in stores, and another wave is just not out yet, with the exception of one figure, which if you know, you know. So this will just be, my thoughts on the figures I currently have, as well as what I think of some of the upcoming figures, or just the ones I don't have yet. So it won't be anything too complicated, and chances are any more elaboration will happen with the figures that end up on my best of year, which, considering what my best of year list looks like right now, there's a good chance that there will be a few Studio Series figures on there. Maybe not that much because Legacy is absolutely kicking ass, but we shall see. So going wave by wave, starting with wave 1, we have something that they are introducing into Studio Series this year, concept art. So here we have Rumble, and for a live-action Rumble design, this actually is pretty decent. It's not the exact G1 design run through the movie filter, but it's still recognizable as the character while having a Bruticus head, which is kind of interesting. It poses pretty decently. Obviously, given the way it looks, it's not going to be the best posing thing, but then again, I don't think we really expect Frenzy and Rumble to be the best posing things. Transformation is pretty decent, and it turns into a little cassette box that unfortunately still doesn't fit Soundwave the best, but for a core class, it's a nice little addition to the collection. However, what's an excellent addition to the collection, and probably my biggest surprise of the year, is Mohawk. Now, Mohawk is a complete non-character from by far the worst Transformers movie. So what business does he have getting a figure that's currently in the top 5 best of the year? That list is bound to change, but I'm not kidding when I say that. He is in the top 5. I don't know what it is about this character, but they have given him just an excellent little figure. The robot mode looks the part. I wish the Mohawk was painted, but, I'm sure that was probably something they couldn't fit into the budget. Posability is honestly on par with some of the best posing of Legacy. This thing is like neck and neck with Gears right now with how good he poses. Transformation is pretty fun, and he turns into a decent approximation of his bike mode given the core class price point. I'm sure a deluxe probably could have gotten a more sleek bike, but I'll take what I can get here. So yeah, even if this gets booted out of the top 5, it will still be in the top 10 for sure. Now these next two figures I've already talked about, starting with Scorponok, an overall great figure that really it just depends on what your thoughts on the robot mode are. I think the robot mode looks pretty nice, but I can see how some people may not like the look of it. And it's not exactly the best posing thing, with really its best joint just being that it has maximum bend on the elbows, like that 180 bend, and that's mainly for transformation, so it's mainly a transformation joint, but it's always nice when they can fit in really good posing when it's part of the transformation. Speaking of the transformation, it's a pretty fun little affair. Not the best thing ever. It doesn't really do too much, but the way the arms become the claws of the scorpion is really cool, and it turns into a really accurate scorpion from Rise of the Beasts. So, whether or not you want this will depend on the person, but overall, I'd still recommend it as a nice little Scorponok. Wheeljack I'm not so fond of. Or should I call this Pablo, because Wheeljack in this universe actually looks like Wheeljack. This looks like a new character that they made up from whole cloth. Or just brown beachcomber. I mean, for what it is, robot mode looks fine. There are some inaccurate details, but it's not the biggest deal. And the van mode looks basically perfect. But the posing is hampered by those awful hot rod shoulders, and the transformation is one that I mainly do just to get into the other mode, and not at all because it's fun, because it's not. It's not the worst transformation I've ever handled. I think I've already sold off the 2 figures that were, duking it out for that position. But if we're talking the figures that I still have with me, he's probably in the top 5, if not in the top 3. Hell, he might even be the top 1. I don't know. There are some figures that I haven't transformed in a while, so I wouldn't know. I'd still say, it's probably worth getting this thing because, the Beast Weaponizer version is just kind of doing its own thing, and the mainline version is part of a 3-pack that's no longer in stores. So if you don't have a Wheeljack, then this is unfortunately your only option. And I say unfortunately because this isn't really a great figure. Now, thankfully, that's not something I can say about Gamer Edition Starscream, because while this thing looked really weird in the pictures, the overall lankiness of his arms is a lot less weird looking in person. Like, these look really spindly here, but they're actually thicker than they look. And overall, I'd say the overall look of the figure is pretty nice. The cockpit is a bit strange with how it's much bigger than it is in the game, but given how clear plastic has gotten kind of a bad reputation because of how breakable it can be, I can see why they would go for the softer, more rubberier plastic. That is such a hard word to say. I don't even know if that is a word. The more rubbery plastic, let's say that. And paint does have a tendency to scratch off of that pretty easily. I would know there is a paint scratch on the one part of this thing that's painted. So I can see the decision here. It makes him look a little bit puffy in the chest in robot mode, but once you get used to it, it's not that distracting. This is also probably the best posing of the Gamer Edition figures, with deep knees and really deep elbows, and the transformation is decent enough. It's not as fun as Gamer Optimus or even the Sideswipe that we're about to be talking about, but it's a pretty solid conversion and a pretty solid jet mode. Again, not the most accurate thing, but it's close enough to where I'm mostly okay with it. While I wouldn't say it's the best Gamer Edition figure, it is pretty close to the top. Now, the nice thing about this video is that it actually gives me a chance to talk about some molds that I haven't really gotten the chance to, like the Wreck-Gar mold, or I guess just the 86 Junkion mold, since they're using Wreck-Gar for all of these. So let's talk about Scrap Heap. This is the weakest one in my opinion. Like, Wreck-Gar was overall a great figure, captured the look of the character perfectly in both modes, posed pretty well despite having only 90 degrees of bend at the elbows and knees, and had a serviceable transformation. It did its job while not being the best or the worst. Junk Heap was a little bit worse than that, since his transformation was a little bit more fiddly, and at least on my copy, the wheels loved falling apart. But I'd still say it's a great figure. This I'd probably only argue is just a really good, almost great figure, just because this has the worst transformation of the three. Now, in terms of robot mode and alt mode, I'd say that all three are pretty much tied because they all look excellent. And posing is pretty much the same. He has slightly less spend in the elbows, but that's extremely minor. Plus, I do kind of like that this one comes with a gun instead of the pinwheel fidget spinner that the other two come with. But the transformation for this guy it's not as fun as the other two. Pegging in the front part of the bike into the arms is more annoying than on the other two, and getting the front part of the bike out of the chest is probably the most annoying part, since you have to scrape it past a very tight space. I will say though, I do like the step where you flip the legs around instead of basically just break them. It's still a good figure, but when compared to the other two, it is the weakest one, though it is a nice addition to the Junkion collection. And that will lead us to the leader of this wave, Megatron. I really wish this was better, if I'm being completely honest. It took me forever to find this guy, and I'm still really happy that I did. Robot mode looks fantastic, exactly what I imagined a live-action Bumblebee movie Megatron would be. He poses excellently with deep knees and deep elbows, and some really mobile feet. And some posable hands, can't go wrong with those. But the transformations are just okay, and the alt modes are also just okay. I mean, they look fine, but they don't really like holding together all that well. The tank turret just turns at a really weird spot when it just turns at a really strange spot, and the jet doesn't look very aerodynamic. The jet's not pictured here because for some reason there are no official images of that thing. Not that it really matters because it's not great anyways. Plus, when I say that the modes don't like holding together, I mainly refer to that one. The tank actually does fine. It's really just the jet that doesn't like staying tabbed in. Now, all that being said, the great thing about this figure and why I actually like it a lot more than I feel like I should is the fan modes. The second people got this in hand, there were fan modes everywhere. There were alternate jet modes, alternate tank modes, a wolf mode, an elephant mode for crying out loud. So there's still a lot that you can do with this guy, so that's why I'd still recommend it. Just, your thoughts on the alt modes may vary from person to person. Now, from wave 1, we go to wave 2. And this wave doesn't have any core class, so we're going to skip right over that. But we are going to start with, honestly, a welcome package refresh of the 86 Sharkticon. And the 86 Sharkticon overall is a pretty good figure. It has some problems, like some loose tolerances, especially with the fin. That thing does not like staying pegged in at all. And a transformation that's mostly fine, and a John Shark mode that is very loose and, depending on your copy, will not stay up whatsoever. But I'd still recommend it because it's still poses pretty well. It gets the look of the robot mode down pretty good, and the shark mode as well. And it's a good army builder. Plus, this package refresh seems to be, or I guess the repack as I have been calling them, this repack is more widely available than the original release, which I guess makes sense since we're farther away from the pandemic than we originally were when this thing came out. So, stocking shelves is a lot easier. Yep. But for $25, it's a nice little army builder. I'm not into army builders, but it's still a good figure. There's also concept art Sunstreaker, which made me really happy when this got leaked because I could not get my hands on an Earthrise Sunstreaker to save my own skin. As much as I want that thing because I have heard fantastic things about it, it is just nowhere. My best bet right now is just buying that Generation Selects 5-pack just buying that 5-pack with him, Hound, was a Trailbreaker, Jazz, and Wheeljack, which mostly contains figures that I've already sold off or already have the molds for, so I don't really know why I'd want that outside of Sunstreaker. So I'll take what I can get with the Bumblebee movie one. Now, when he was initially leaked, I'll admit he didn't look too much like he fit into the Bumblebee movie aesthetic, but getting him in hand and putting him with the other Studio Series Bumblebee movie characters, he fits right in. I'd argue that he even blends in, if I'm being honest. That's how well he fits into the aesthetic. Posing isn't really the best, but he does have very mobile feet, so I can appreciate that. Transformation's fun, and the alt mode is very nice. I especially love the clear wheels that are, basically covered up by the rest of the car. Very futuristic and alien. So overall, if you need a Sunstreaker for your collection, I don't really have anything else to recommend here. Now, Sideswipe, I'd say by far is the best of the Gamer Edition Deluxes. I'd still say the Voyagers outclass him, but if we're talking Deluxes, then it's a no-brainer. It's going up against Barricade, who is the worst posing figure that Hasbro's put out in years. Bumblebee, who is very inaccurate. I know I say I'm not an accuracy stickler, but that's mainly talking about, smaller details. And even if it wasn't inaccurate, it would look very weird. Cliffjumper, who's just repainted that Bumblebee, and the Decepticon Soldier, who I'll actually save my thoughts on for later. But when compared to the rest of the lineup, this one poses the best. It has the most fun transformation, probably the best alt mode, and a robot mode that has some weird proportions, but overall still looks pretty good. Plus, there is a bit of Play-Doh factor in the transformation, but you still can't go wrong with this one. Shockwave is, well, a great figure that has some problems. I don't know if this is a direct upscale of the core class from 2022. At least I think that's when that figure came out. Time flies, I tell you what. But this did fix some of the problems it had, like a lack of solidity and pretty limited articulation. It still lacks a bicep swivel because that's just where they had to put the peg for transformation, or the port. Still, I feel like you probably could have put some kind of swivel in that. It's not like, it would really matter if the port was broken up at all. You still probably could have put a swivel in there and just have it line up straight for transformation. But bicep swivel be damned, it still poses pretty well for a Voyager. The transformation is pretty much the same as the core class, but a lot more solid. And the tank mode is, again, just like that core class, but a lot more solid in, I'd argue, better colors. Also, I just really like the hose for the cannon. I don't know, something about it is just very satisfying to handle. And honestly, this whole figure is very satisfying to handle. And it's just a great figure of Shockwave. I've already talked about Swoop, so very quickly going through my thoughts. Chest is a bit too wide, but otherwise robot mode looks great. Posing, pretty good. Maximum knees, but only 90 elbows. Transformation, simple, but way too tight getting out of Pterodactyl into robot mode, and the Pterodactyl mode is mostly great with the exception of the legs hanging off the back. But it is very nice and heavy, the head's very mobile, and the wings are also very nice. A great way to end the 86 Dinobots, but not necessarily the best of that set. Now, before we go on to Wave 3, I'd like to talk about the A-level assortment. My understanding of this assortment is that it's figures that will, have their cases show up at stores more often, and they'll have their own separate cases, so they're separate from all the different stuff from Legacy and Studio Series, but they'll have a naturally longer shelf life. Not in the sense that they'll shelf warm, because if I'm being honest, neither of these figures have shelf warmed. Hell, I haven't found one of them until literally the day I'm recording this, and then the other one I've had for about a week or two. But it's more in the sense that, they'll get shipped out for longer than your standard Studio Series or Legacy Wave. And so far, we only have 2 figures in this assortment, so let's start off with Transformers 1 Optimus Prime. For what this figure is, I'd say that it's pretty great. It captures the look of the character from the upcoming movie. I wish the colors were a bit brighter, considering what he looked like in the most recent trailer, but the colors still aren't that bad, and even the weird yellowed gray actually looks a lot better in hand than it does in these pictures. Posing is pretty good overall. Transformation is mostly fine, if a little bit, not solid, whatever the opposite of solid is. And the truck mode is also great, though, again, it could hold together a little bit better. Plus, getting back into truck mode, the left arm on mine actually likes popping off sometimes. So it's a great figure overall, a great little deluxe, but it's not the best thing we could have gotten. And I have heard that there are some people who like the mainline figure more, so, either way, they both look pretty solid for the character in the movie, so, again, depending on your preference. Now, 86 Bumblebee is an excellent little figure of Bumblebee. Not necessarily top 10 best of the year excellent, but honorable mentions of that list excellent. No joke, I literally found this at a GameStop that's 30 minutes away from me today, the day I'm recording this. Literally the day after I order him on Pulse, because that's just my luck sometimes. Robot mode, overall pretty nice. Proportions are a little weird, but you can still easily and instantly recognize this as Bumblebee. Posing is good. Not the best, but serviceable for the size of this guy. Transformation is interesting and fun, and the alt mode is just easily the best thing about this figure. It's a very nice representation of the little penny racer that he was in the show and in the movie. I don't remember if he transformed in the movie or not, but either way, it's very accurate to that. It rolls very well, and it's just the cutest little thing. Honestly, I'd recommend this for the alt mode alone, but the rest of the figure is still doing pretty great as it is. Now, Wave 3 is slowly trickling out into stores, even if I've only seen 2 of these figures, one of which is not Steeljaw, though I would really like this thing because, honestly, I want Blaster to have more cassettes. That's kind of what Steeljaw is. He's one of Blaster's cassettes, who actually comes with his speaker weapon, which is a really cool addition to kind of just bump up the core class price a little bit. Kind of like what they did with Rumble and Frenzy and their pile drivers. And overall, the Steeljaw cassette looks really nice. The cassette mode looks great. The line mode looks great. I appreciate that the guns are like pinned on instead of pegged on, because I remember the third-party Deformation Space Blaster. He came with a ram horn whose rocket pods loved falling off, at least from what I've heard. So having these pinned on instead of just pegged on, it's a nice little bit of security. I'm sure it'll also have a pretty simple transformation, all things considered, but if I find this, I will definitely be picking it up. Now, the Decepticon Soldier from Gamer Edition, I initially wasn't going to pick up, but I saw him at literally every store I went to, so I eventually caved and bought him. And honestly, despite this being a Barricade retool, I'm actually glad I did, because he's really good. Dare I say, better than Barricade. The look is a lot sleeker thanks to him not having kibble literally everywhere. I guess it helps that his backpack isn't as big as Barricade's was, and the kibble placement is a little bit better. From the front, the silhouette's a lot better. From the side, it's not great, but who displays their figures from the sides? posing's a little bit better with deeper range in his elbows and knees, and his feet are a lot less loose. In fact, they actually click in on this figure. Still comes with the same gun, but it's a decent gun. Transformation is maybe slightly worse since you have to squish a lot more things. But the alt mode I actually do like a lot more. It's like this little battering ram of a car, and I really like it. So I'd still say that even if you're disappointed, even if you were disappointed with Barricade, I'd still at least recommend this just so you can experience what he could have been. That's how I feel about this guy. He's what Barricade could have been, but wasn't. Now, like with Scrap Heap and Wreck-Gar, Skywarp gives me a chance to talk about the Bumblebee movie Starscream mold. And it's a figure that I can say that I really do love. It's a really fun figure of Starscream that captures his look from the Bumblebee movie. Pose is pretty good, has an interesting transformation that's not too complex to be annoying, and has a decent enough Tetrajet. It's the way that they transform the movie, it's kind of bullshit with getting a Tetrajet that sleek while the robot mode looks like that. Definitely pulling some live action movie magic, but for a $30 Voyager, it's a decent approximation of their Tetrajet from the movie. That being said, I'm okay with just having Starscream. I don't really care about Thundercracker or Skywarp as characters, and while I did buy the Thrust, he is currently among the figures that I'm trying to sell off. Plus, I never found Thundercracker, but I have seen Skywarp numerous times, and I'll be honest, I really don't care about this. I'm okay with just Starscream, but this is going to be a pass. But if you want it, it's an excellent figure. Which leads us to 86 Springer. Now, with this figure, this is something that I was only thinking of getting if they fix the biggest problem with the Siege figure, because this is blatantly a retool of the Siege Voyager. And thankfully, they did. They actually gave his knees somewhere to lock in. The problem with the Siege figure is that the transformation joint at the knees didn't tab in that well and was way too loose. And from what I've heard, they actually fixed that. They're tighter and they actually clip into place. Plus, any issues that Springer previously had are fixed, at least from what I've heard. For all I know, there could still be some copies that aren't great. But you know what? If I find this guy, I'll definitely pick him up. And who knows, maybe I'll do a video comparing him to the Thrilling 30 Springer. Now, moving on to Wave 4, this is the wave that's not out yet. And for the most part, I'd say it looks fairly decent. Starting with Core Class Starscream, I can see the appeal here. It is a great looking little Bumblebee movie Starscream, but given that my Bumblebee movie Core Shockwave went in my storage tub, I can't really be bothered to care about this thing because it's basically a companion piece to a figure that I put in storage. So, if you want him, he looks great, and I've heard great things about the people who already have him somehow. But it's not something that I care all that much about. Frenzy, on the other hand, I'll be more than happy to pick up. Rumble was good, and this is just that in colors that appeal to me more as someone who likes black and red. They're also repacking the Reactivate Bumblebee from those 2-packs in this wave as a deluxe, and while I would say this is the weakest figure of those 4, it's still a really good figure, and something that I can definitely see myself recommending to someone if you don't already have the 2-packs like I do. At the very least, this gives me hope that they'll reissue the other 3 figures in Gamer Edition, because yes, this is part of the Gamer Edition subline, as it honestly probably should be. It is a video game. Now, if only that we can actually get some news on that game so we can at least be reassured that it's not canceled. They're also doing a Transformers 1 Megatron, which looks like it'll be an excellent companion piece to the already great Optimus, with an awesome looking robot mode and a fantastic looking tank mode. I especially love the cannon. You don't see a lot of Megatrons with a cannon like that. Gamer Edition Ratchet looks like it'll probably be the best of the Gamer Edition figures. It has Optimus to go up against, but this still looks pretty great for what it is, and it doesn't have any weird proportional issues that people don't like. And that brings us to the reason I even made this figure in this video in the first place, and that's Commander Class 86 Optimus Prime. And boy, has the discussion on this figure been heated online. The first image we got of this thing was a side view of him playing the piano. That could not have been a weirder leak, and it gave a very, very good look at the biggest issue that people are taking with this is that he apparently has a finger quotes huge finger quotes backpack, or just finger quotes huge backpack. And it's not even that bad of a backpack. There are figures in Legacy that have worse backpacks. Hell, it doesn't look that much worse than like 86 Ultra Magnus's backpack. He doesn't even have much of one. He just has some stuff sticking off the back. It's just like a little bit of stuff sticking a little ways off the back. And this also has a little bit of stuff sticking little ways off the back. Like, there are so many figures that do backpacks worse that I honestly can't be too bothered to care about that. But besides that, this basically just looks like a downscale of the MP44 Optimus, you know, the one that everyone hates. Though from what I've heard, this is better in the transformation. It's at least not an overcomplicated nightmare. It's just as complicated as it needs to be to turn that super clean robot mode from the show into that super clean truck mode from the show. And I'll be honest, I've heard a lot of people compare this to the Earthrise figure, but the Earthrise figure has been one that has really soured on me over time. It's not bad, I still like it. It's just a figure that poses really good, but not as good as the Siege, and transforms pretty good, but not as good as the Siege, while having a unfinished looking truck mode with a giant visible gap from most angles, and just an unfinished cab that just stops at the thighs, as well as a weirdly proportioned robot mode with a puffy chest, stubby looking arms, and knees that are very long but are a lot more noticeable when you pose him. Like, yeah, I'm not going to entertain the idea that that thing looks better than this. And overall, this looks like it could end up being my definitive Optimus. I mean, it has to dethrone the Siege Optimus, which is one of my favorite figures ever. Like, I'd love to, see that this transformation dethrone that one, and it doesn't look like this will pose as well as that does, though honestly, I don't care about that. The two figures above it pose worse than it in terms of my overall top 5 favorite figures. Like, the two figures that outrank that guy, he's number 3. The two that are above him, I'd argue, pose worse than he does, and they still ended up above him. So this could have a chance. Also, this is going to be bigger than Kingdom Rodimus, who was a commander that I'm not really comfortable paying $80 for anymore. So at the very least, they're putting in as much effort and money into this as they can. So to the person who wanted my thoughts on this, I'm ecstatic and really looking forward to it. And hell, I might actually make a single video on this. Or a video on just this, is what I mean. But anyways, guys, that's going to be it for my thoughts on Studio Series this year. I might do a video like this for 2025, though I'm honestly not entirely sure because 2025 is the year that I plan on slowing down in terms of collecting. But other than that, if you enjoyed, feel free to leave a like and subscribe for more fun content. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care, and Godspeed.